Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Business Talk Library, and today I have a special guest on from Australia. It is Nick Bendel, and his profile on LinkedIn caught my attention because he had this hashtag 500 lunches. And I was just like, man, that is interesting where he is actually having lunch and getting to know and building relationships with a ton of people. So I had to have him on the show. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Thank you so much, Terrell. Really happy to be here.
Absolutely. Now, Nick, tell us a little bit about your professional background before you started the business that you're in now.
Well, Terrell, I've got a background as a journalist. I spent about 10 years as a journalist and as a writer. And I had quite a few people over the years, quite a few contacts ask me to do freelance writing work for them. And eventually I decided to set up my own content marketing agency, which is basically a copywriting agency. And I did that 2 years ago.
Gotcha. Now, did you find much of a difference between, the journalism writing you were doing before to moving into content marketing, or I guess you say copywriting?
They're very similar. I would say the big difference is the business model. It's not so much the writing, but the business model. When you're doing content marketing, good content marketing is interesting and relevant for the reader. And when you're doing journalism, good journalism is interesting and relevant for the reader. So there really isn't all that much difference with the writing. The key difference is there's a different business model for journalism as opposed to content marketing.
Awesome. So, what was that journey like of going from, you said working in journalism to now having to learn the business model behind, your content marketing agency and figuring that out? What was that like?
Well, being a business owner has been incredibly exciting, Terrell. I'm 41 now. I started the business when I was 39, and I had wanted to have my own business since I was a child. But a couple of things held me back. One of those things that held me back was fear. I was nervous about doing something where I might fail, where I might borrow money and then go bankrupt and owe lots of people money. And then another thing that held me back was I wasn't really sure what I wanted to sell. But a couple of years ago, I thought, well, what I want to sell is writing. That's the thing I'm good at. And I now have the right mindset where I feel like I can do this business and I want to do it. In the past 2 years, Terrell, since I've had the business, I have learned so much because the big difference between being a business owner and an employee, when you're an employee, almost nothing is your problem. But when you're the business owner, everything is your problem. But that turns out to be a blessing in disguise because it means that you have so many more opportunities to learn and grow. And I've learned more in the past 2 years than I did the 39 previous years.
And I think that's a very common thing that I've heard a lot of people say, and even for myself, where it took me a little longer to make that decision to, like I said, start my own CPA and corporate finance consulting was it's just that, like I said, that step of, hey, if I step out here and do this, what if it doesn't work? And just trying to think through that. So how did you get past I guess you say, the mental fear of making that decision?
Well, there were a couple of things that helped me, Terrell. First, as a journalist, I did business journalism, and during my years, I would have interviewed more than 1,000 business owners. And that was an incredible lesson because I interviewed so many successful people, and I discovered that these successful people, they're often, and this might surprise some people, they're often not that smart. But what makes them successful is the fact that they have the right mindset and they work hard and they take risks and they put themselves out there. And when they cop rejection, and they get knocked over, they get back up. So that was one thing that reassured me that if I was just prepared to work hard and keep persevering, I would succeed. And then I think maybe the other thing that gave me the confidence to do this was I didn't jump straight from A to Z, or Z as you would call it in America. I started the business as a side hustle. So I had the security of a full-time job. And if for whatever reason things didn't work out, it meant that I could just give up the business and I would still have my full-time job. So I did the business on the side for a bit until I proved the concept and until it was impossible to juggle both a business and a job.
Okay, no, that makes a lot of sense. So, what has been like, in those earlier stages, what have been some of like the challenging lessons that you had to learn in figuring out like how to actually build the business model?
I would say the biggest challenge I've had, Terrell, and I guess this applies for every business, is making sales. And when you look at making sales, you then have to ask yourself, well, what is it that my customers want and what price are they willing to pay? And how do I get their attention? And what sort of messages do I come up with when I've got their attention? So the sales challenge is also a marketing challenge. And I'm still trying to figure those two things out, but I'm much more comfortable with selling, and I've become much more astute in terms of marketing because I now better understand who my customers are and what they're looking for. So I would say sales and related to that, marketing have been my biggest challenges.
Awesome, awesome. So, tell us a little bit about the 500 lunches. Now, where did that come into play? And I guess how does that even fit into your business or what you're doing?
Well, Terrell, I'm in the process of having lunch with 500 strangers in 5 years. I started 11 months ago and I've had lunch with 112 strangers so far.
Wow.
And I stole the idea of one of my LinkedIn connections. She had lunch with 100 strangers in 2018. Her name is Kaylee Chu, and she wrote a book called 100 Lunches with Strangers. And I bought Kaylee's book, and I was really inspired by the way she built her network and the way she'd attracted opportunities into her life, the way she'd improved her social skills, the way she had sharpened her mindset. So I thought I would do the same thing. But because I'm a show off, I decided I would do 500 lunches instead of 100. And it's been an incredible journey so far. You asked the question about whether the 500 lunches is connected to my business. I would. The short answer is no. I'm not trying to turn any of these people into clients. Having said that, I think 4 or 5 of them have become clients. But my feeling, Terrell, is that if I build a great network and if I improve my mindset and if I become a better person, then I'll naturally invite opportunity into my life anyway.
Awesome. So, what has been some of the, the interesting lessons or things that you've learned so far with the lunches that you've had?
I'll share a couple with you, Terrell. So, one interesting thing, I've met some really smart and really successful people. And when you have a lunch with them, especially if it goes for 2 or 3 hours, it can get quite personal and they can really open up to you. And one thing that's intrigued me is a lot of these incredibly smart, incredibly successful people are surprisingly insecure. And you wouldn't think it from the outside, but once you get to know them, you can see that they're surprisingly insecure. So it's interesting to know that even elite people have the same insecurities as the rest of us. And a second lesson I've learned, Terrell, is I've noticed that the people who are meeting me seem to be more positive and more proactive and more open minded than the average person. And I've also noticed that these people are happier and more successful than the average person. And I think those things are linked. I think the reason they're happier and more successful is because they're more positive and proactive and open minded.
Awesome, awesome. So, what are some of the things that you kind of have you learned things about yourself in this process of, like I said, of reaching out to these strangers to even ask them to go to lunch with you?
Yeah. So one of the lessons I've learned, Terrell, is we just need to ask for more things. We're often scared in life to ask for things, and sometimes we think it's not appropriate. But I've learned that we need to ask for more things. And as I've started asking for more things, I've become more comfortable asking for things. And I suspect part of the reason we don't ask for things is maybe we don't think we deserve these things we're asking for. But I've learned to change my mindset around that. And I now feel more comfortable asking for things and I guess more deserving of the things I'm asking for.
Awesome, awesome. So now going back to your content marketing agency, when it comes down to that business, what are the services that you provide?
We do writing for other companies, Terrell. So we write blogs, social media posts, ebooks, emails, website copy, media releases, case studies, any type of writing for businesses, we do.
Okay. So where can people find you online, or where can they find you on social media to get in touch with you?
If they want to get in touch with me, Terrell, a good way is to connect with me on LinkedIn. They're also free to email me, nick@hunterandscribe.com.
Awesome. Awesome. So a couple of things that I always ask every guest is when you think about, your business, of what do you see, the goal? What does, I guess you say, the next goal for your business look like?
Okay. That is an interesting question. So I've got a vague goal. I want the business to be turning over more than $1 million. So I want it to be a 7-figure business. At the moment, it's a 6-figure business. I don't have any specific numbers though. So I don't have a number. I'm not thinking it's got to be 1 million or 5 million or 10 million or 90 million, nor do I have any sort of time frame for when I might get there. My goal is more around process rather than outcomes. I want to keep doing the right activities every day and every week, because I figure, Terrell, that if you keep doing the right activities, eventually you're going to get the rewards you're looking for.
And I think that that is a very interesting way to look at the goal, because it reminds me of something that my wife and I have been talking about, even with the Business Talk Library show. Is, at one point we were focused on, hey, we want to get this level of viewership or to achieve this level of sponsorship, and it's just like, how about we just take a step back and let's just focus on what are the steps and the activity that we need to do, things that are in our control, and let's set our targets on those. Like, hey, our goal is to do X 5 times a week, or to do, Y, 7, 8 times a week, to where we can get in a consistent rhythm, knowing that, hey, the process will generate the results that we ultimately want.
Has that improved the way you go about doing the podcast?
I would say it is definitely, I think, changed the stress level about the different things involved with the podcast. So it definitely increased the number of podcasts that we were doing, because we started off with doing maybe, you know, 3 a week, to where now we're filming 6 to 10 a week. So it definitely, took the stress, and I think it caused us to have that slight shift in the mindset, to where the work involved in the process became more exciting and more interesting, as opposed to, hey, this is just a means to an end.
Okay, interesting. I guess I've got kind of a similar mindset in terms of focusing on actions rather than results. And I like the word you used before, Terrell, about control. Was we can control our actions, but we can't control what the rest of the world does. So I prefer to focus on the things that I can control.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, one question that I like to ask before we wrap up, and this is something I always ask every guest that comes on, is when you think about, your journey in your business, and you think about, your specific skill set, of copywriting, what are 2 tips that you have learned that you would share with other entrepreneurs and say, hey, this is something you should grasp if you want to be successful?
Okay, so are you looking for 2 business tips or 2 copywriting tips?
I would say 2 copywriting tips.
Okay, I'll give 2 copywriting tips for everyone. First, use simple words. Second, use fewer words.
Awesome. Now, do you find that many people struggle with trying to implement that?
Yes, so in terms of the first tip, Terrell, use simple words. People believe that if they use fancy, formal, complicated words, they'll sound smarter. Actually, the opposite is true, because the clearer you are as a communicator, the smarter people think you are. And the simpler your words, the clearer your communications will be. In terms of the second thing, using fewer words, people also struggle with that. Again, partly because they believe the longer they speak for, the more important they'll sound. In fact, the opposite is true, because the longer you go for, the less persuasive you become. But also, I've noticed, Terrell, that there is a real link between clarity of thought and clarity of expression. And it's really hard for people to express themselves clearly and concisely if their thoughts aren't clear in their mind. So one of the reasons people just take too many words to explain themselves is often they're not quite sure what they want to say.
Gotcha. I think that makes a lot of sense because even when I think about the videos, like some of the original content that we do is I've realized the videos where I've gone through a couple of drafts of like writing out what I wanted to say, those are always so much easier, so much cleaner than the ones that I just try to do off the top of my head.
If we want to express ourselves clearly, Terrell, we need to think clearly first.
Awesome, awesome. Well, definitely thank you so much for coming on the show and thank you for telling us a little bit more about your business, the 500 lunches, and for sharing the wisdom and the insight from your expertise. And we'll definitely keep an eye out for what's going on with you and very interested to see, what comes of your 500 lunches and all the insight that you're learning there.
Thank you so much, Terrell. I've really enjoyed it. And next time you're in Sydney, Australia, let's have lunch.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks for tuning in to the Business Talk Library. If you like what you heard and you want to hear more, be sure to click the subscribe button and follow us on all social media platforms as the Business Talk Library.